How are you?
Okay. Fine.
What's your name?
My name is Khalid.
Khalid, nice to meet you. Hi. How are you?
Fine.
What age are you, Khalid?
I'm 18 years old.
Are you in college or are you in school?
I'm in school.
You're Palestinian, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever see Palestine? Do you think you'll ever go back to Palestine?
Yes, I'm lover to go back in Palestine to see Qudus and Ariha, Gaza.
Do you want to go there?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think you will?
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Imagine being evicted from your home and your homeland, travelling to a land unknown. That was the fate that befell hundreds and thousands of Palestinians 70 years ago. We've come to Shatila and Sabra, Burj Barajne and Nahar Farad, 4 of 12 Palestinian camps in the Lebanon, to hear from those who fled and hear from their children and grandchildren about how it feels to be without a home and a homeland.
كلمة لاجئ في أدمحية اللاجئين 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 صار لي 70 سنة هنا.
هلا أسوأ شيء العيش بالمخيم إنه لا في الكهرباء مش مزبوطة. من 3 سنين لهلا صار 152 شاب بالكهرباء.
وكمان احنا واطفال كان عندنا هدف بهالحياه وبس طلعنا شوي على الطبيعه خلص ما بطل في امل بهالحياه عايشين.
أنا اسمي عبد الله طالب صلحاني. أنا صار لي 70 سنة بلبنان. مش مبسوط. أنا فلسطين كنت راعي غنم وعايشين في بيت على قدنا. ليش أنا سجة الزيتون لما أنا بحوشها بإيدي وبعصرها باكل زيتاتها. تسوى الدنيا وما فيها. سجتها عندي أول شيء 50-60 شجرة. فيش أغلى من الوطن. بشرح وطني عم ببكي عليه.
They were driven from their homes or fled from their homes in what is now Israel during the war of 1948-49 when the Israeli state was established. The refugees were living on the land which is now Israel. They were fleeing a war, and there was a natural assumption when the war was over you would go back to your home. If you read the diaries of the first arrivals in Beirut, they clearly believed a matter of weeks, months at the most, and it would be arranged that they could return.
أنا حضرتي حياة سراد من مخيم البرج. عايشين عيشة لا حول ولا يعني، نبريج، كهرباء. شوفوا كيف علينا على السطوح، على البيوت، طلعوا النبريج، شوفوا فوق راسكم كيف. كلها كهرباء ومي مع بعضها، مخلوطي خلط. يعني ما بنعرف أي ساعة بكهرب الواحد، الزبال عندنا صاروا هي العيشة. شوفوا العيشة الفلسطيني كيف. ليك الشمس، ما الشمس بعيدة، ليك أبعدها عننا، يعني قليل بتطل بس قليل. ما بتدخل البيوت جوا من كتر كثافة العمار والسكان. نحن يعني احنا كخلقنا بلبنان سبحان الله بس نسمع بسيرة فلسطين ما بتعرف يا ربي بتعود ما بتعود ربك اعلم بس ان شاء الله بتعود ان شاء الله نحن بنقول ان شاء الله متكلين على الله.
More than just an aspiration, that right of return for Palestinians is enshrined in the 1948 United Nations General Assembly Resolution 194, subsequently reaffirmed by the UN Assembly in 1974. While awaiting that right to be realised, Palestinian refugees live in Lebanon in 12 camps across the country on land made available by the Lebanese government. However, here in Beirut, the city authorities do not provide any municipal services. The Lebanese do not enter the camps, leaving security to the Palestinians themselves.
My name is Muhammad Isa Al-Khatib. I am 71 years old and I run a museum of memories in Shatila camp. The museum has more or less 1,000 pieces that the Palestinians were brought with them in 1948. The key is the symbol of the right to return to the houses and to the country of every one of the Palestinians. Because when they left Palestine, by force they were pushed. They brought with them the key because they thought that they would return soon. But this soon now is 70 years old. And so the people say, okay, I have the key, my land is there, and one day I will return back. With the key, you open the door and you enter to the house. This key does not belong to here. This key belongs to Palestine and must go back to Palestine, return back. This is my right and the right of all the Palestinians.
أنا إجيت لهون اليوم أنا دايماً كل فترة وفترة باجي لهون بفتح الجوجل وبطلع على صوري على مدينتي في فلسطين. هون بحر عكا. أنا لما أرجع فلسطين إنه هذا المكان اللي بدي أعيش فيه لأنه هذا هو المكان إنه بالنهاية هاي مدينتي وهو بيكون جدودنا حكي لنا عنها فعنشان هيك عشان أتعرف عليها أكتر. هدول الصور كتير مختلفين إنه إحنا وين عايشين بالمخيم هون والمي وهيك يعني ما موفر لنا كل شيء لنعيش حياة سليمة.
I think the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, if I talk precisely about Lebanon, is doubly traumatized. Traumatized how they were kicked out in 48, but how the Lebanese authority has treated them in a terrible way. I mean, no right to work, no right to own properties. So it's a basic needs. I mean, now we are talking about 4 generations of Palestinians in Lebanon without the basic right.
اسمي محمد حزيني عمري 22 سنة. مش شبه يومية يعني مش كل يوم بس يكون في عنا يعني شيء ما بقعد نوعا ما يعني ما في شغل يعني 3/4 يعني حتى في شباب من المخيم ما بلا شغل خلوه كيف بدي اقول لك اياه يعني انه
اسمي مريم محمد الشيخ عيسى أنا فلسطينية ساكنة بمخيم برج البرج. صراحة أنا يمكن من قبل وقت كان طموحاتي أكبر من هيك بكتير. كنت بتمنى أخلص جامعة كفي ماستر اشتغل بالهندسة غير حياة أهلي وحياتي بس هلأ للصراحة يعني صرت شوي خايفة من اللي جاي.
UNESCO, in cooperation with UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, provides education and training for Palestinian refugee children and youth in Lebanon. For many young people, the question is, then what?
أنا شغلي وزع كيك بستوردهم من معمل باخدهم أنا ببيع العالم هون دكاكين. لا مش شغلي المفضل في عندي شغل أنا مفضل. أنا كنت بمعهد درست 2 سنين ماسترينج ساوند جرافيك ساوند بس ما صح لي اطلع ستاج برا لأن فلسطين ممنوع يعمل ستاج او بهاي الاشياء مجالات كلياتها اونلاين حدا بده شيء فرص عمل لهندسه الصوت ولا لا بس اكثر شيء عم بيقولوا فلسطين ما فينا نوظف انه بس قتلوا لي طموحي فيها.
The problem is that we create refugees very quickly, wherever they are in the world. And we then think, okay, now they've got camps, they can be fed, they can be educated, pitifully, but they can be educated. They're not being massacred, except on rare occasions. It's over. But the idea that they have rights, we don't go that far.
I am going to see a friend called Yahya Fawzi Abu Hashmi. He is now 84 years old. He was 13 years more or less when he left Palestine. كيفك؟ كيف أحوالك؟
الله يخليك.
إن شاء الله منيح.
الله يخليك.
كيف الصحة؟
الحمد لله.
هاي حيفا. هون كنتوا ساكنين. طيب طلعتوا من حيفا على لبنان.
طلعنا من حيفا أيوان على طريق عكا على النقورة.
هاي هون خريطة للأرض.
نعم للأرض كلها.
الأرض كلها. هاي خريطة الأرض اللي إلكم.
نعم.
هذا بيت جدك.
نعم.
وكمان بيتك أنت.
نعم.
مزبوط؟
نعم.
أنت كان في لك غرفة هون.
أنا ولدت هون غرفتي. صيف شتاء. بالشتاء هون. بالصيف هون. هون لأنه في برندة. احنا ما طلعنا إلا على أساس إنه نرجع 15 يوم.
يعني صار لنا 70 سنة.
صار لنا 80 سنة.
صار لنا 70 سنة.
نعم.
شيء مؤلم ها؟ شيء مؤلم.
بس شيء مؤلم وشيء مخزي.
أنا كنت خاطب عمري حوالي 21 سنة. مش منو تاخذ شيء، كل شيء ضل بأرض إنك أسبوع بترجع. صار أسبوع ما صارش أسبوع. صرنا 70 سنة. بقعد برا بقعد ببكي على حالي. يعني مت في بلدي ولا أجي لهون. أخي أخذ وطني.
لك انا هلا انت عم تحكينا على الختيار اللي وراي. هلا انا يوم من الايام يمكن اصير زيه وما ارجع، ويمكن اموت وما ارجع، ويمكن اموت ويرجع يحيى بعدي ويرجع يحيى بعدي، وحتضل القصه هيك لحتى لا نرجع. بس المهم في جيل حيطلع جديد ويرجع على فلسطين.
الحياة بالمخيم أول شيء هذا السؤال، يعني أول شيء من نظرتك للعيشة هون بالمخيم. بس إحنا يعني عايشين يعني تحت أمر الواقع، يعني ما في بديل، ما في ملاهي، ما في عندنا حقوق للطفل. يعني وين عم بيلعب الولد؟ بالطريق، بالطرقات الولد يعني.
رجعتوا علاماتكم؟ شو لقيتوا؟ I am Sa'ad Sresh, Palestinian refugees. I am the school principal of Haifa school. I have 641 students, boys and girls. Most of my students are living in camps, especially in Shatila. And Shatila camp has a lot of problems. There is a great amount of humidity. As a result of this, most of the students, they have some respiratory problems, and especially asthma. They have it. And because the water is not so clean, some of them may have some problems in their stomach. And approximately 40% of my students having something like depression because of psychological, social, economical, and health also.
This is why the question of refugees is so vivid in the mind of the Palestinian of Lebanon. I mean, it's something unbelievable. We cannot believe that you have such exclusionary area, such as refugee camps. This is why I use the word space of exception. Camps as a space of exception, that there is no urban regulation. The population there, they don't have a status.
For 40 continuous hours between sunset on Thursday the 16th of September and midday Saturday the 18th of September 1982, one of the most infamous massacres of the late 20th century took place here in Shatila. Photographic evidence that emerged following the bloodbath demonstrated the depth of depravity that unfolded here.
The Sabra and Shatila massacre was the bloody highlight and climax of Israel's invasion of Lebanon in 1982. And the purpose of that invasion, and Israeli scholars, historians, politicians have talked about this, was effectively to end the political Palestinian presence in Lebanon. Drive them out, throw them out, send them to Syria, anywhere, but make sure that you have a safe Christian minority presidency allied to Israel. So the whole purpose of the invasion of Lebanon in 1982 was effectively to neutralize the Palestinians and to destroy them as well. The Israelis watched the massacre happening and did nothing.
أبشخ من فوقيها كلها قتلة كلها حط بعضها شباب اللي بالبلطة اللي مكسرة ايديه اللي دبحينه اللي مسوينه صرت أبنه مع جوزي وابني وجدي وأبوي وأخوي. ضليتني راح أركض هيك لقيته زلمة نايم بين حيطين من هون حيط من هون حيط ونايم هيك ومدبوح هيك مدبوح ذبحها هيك. الملاجئ هيدي تبع المي هيدي أنا نزلت أبرم على جوزي وابني. ما كنت ألاقيهن من جوا ودمي وعمري ما راح أنساهن
The massacre began on a Thursday and it finished at Saturday midday. I arrived on Saturday morning. There was just devastation, flattened houses, exploded buildings, corpses lying in the street, a woman who'd been eviscerated, a dead baby beside her. And we realized we could hear armored vehicles moving, and we realized that the Phalangist militia, the murderers, were still in the camp. And we, at one point, ran into the backyard of a hovel, and there was a woman lying on her back, and she'd just been killed. There was blood running from her head. She'd obviously stayed in her home when she heard all the shooting of the massacre, and she'd tried to carry on an ordinary life, and you could see some of her clothes were hanging on a clothesline. She'd been shot as she was putting out the morning clothes for drying in the sun. We walked on through the camp, and you sort of lost any thought about fear. You just were so appalled at what had happened. I walked over a mass grave that was bouncing under my feet. I climbed over corpses. When I got back to my home, my clothes were stinky of dead people. I mean, it was just, I remember saying, I don't care what the Israeli lobby may say, I don't care what all the friends of Israel may say, this is a war crime and I'm going to write about it, and I don't care a hell what anyone says.
80 miles north of Beirut and close to the Syrian border, Tripoli is home to the refugee camp Nahr al-Barad. In 2007, a 15-week battle between the Lebanese army and al-Qaeda-linked militants hidden within the camp led to its total destruction. Those who fled Palestine were forced to flee again.
It was 27,000 people had to leave, so it was a massive upheaval and calamity for this community. The camp was fully destroyed. I mean, there was nothing left for people to return to.
John White is the UNRWA project manager for the reconstruction. United Nations Resolution 302 established UNRWA. Funded almost entirely by voluntary contributions from UN member states, UNRWA provides education, health, social services and camp improvement services for the Palestinian refugees living here.
It's the single largest project ever undertaken by UNRWA in any of its fields of operations. The cost of the project is $329 million. So we're planning to reconstruct homes for 5,000 families. So as of now, over 2,700 families have returned, which means another 2,200 have yet to return.
يعني ما مصدقة إنه نزلنا على بيتي. يعني ننطر اليوم، يعني يجي نهار نقول اسأل الله وانت يخلص هذا النهار عشان يجي نهار تاني. الليلة ما نمت. احنا عانينا كتير بالبركسات. بهاي السنة منصير 12 سنة واحنا بالمعاناة.
أنا هون كنت أنام هون، بس أنا بالبيت القديم بنام لحالي بوجهي على الشباك، إنه أحط تحت هيك وجبت الشباك بوجهي البحر. بس إنه عانينا كتير والحمد لله تعمر المخيم، وإن شاء الله العالم كلها بترجع بيوتها.
نزلة.
In a sense, politically, couldn't this make the return more difficult because the international community would say, look, we've poured millions of money in here, so why don't you stay here? Does the existence of this place limit the possibility of people returning?
I don't think so, because the government, whenever you ask them about their position with regard to the Palestinians, they are the first to say, we recognise and endorse the right of Palestinians to return to their place of origin. While families are waiting, they have the right to decent living standards and to a dignified life for them and their families.
أنا مبسوطة لأني رجعت على بيتي الجديد وهذا كان حلمنا بس هاي البلاد مش بلادنا وبننبسط أكتر بنكون مبسوطين أكتر بس نرجع على بلادنا فلسطين.
أنطاهم صينية من فضة وهل يقعدوا هذا البيت. كيف بدي أسامحه؟ كيف بدي أسامحه؟ لا أسامحنيش لا. أخي أخذوا وطني بيتي مسقط راسي تاخده تقعد فيه.
Do you recognize the state of Israel?
No. How can I recognize a thief that come to my home and take it by force? It's injustice. It's unhuman. It's illogic. Somebody come to your house and say, here I have a rifle. Go out, this is my home. And you recognize that? How can be? It's out of the imagination. It means we have to be mad to recognize that. We have to be mad, not normal.
The problem is, you see, that it's all very well to say, yes, we have the right to return. That's where I'm born, that's where my parents come from, that's where my grandparents come from. Fine, but you know, how far back does that go? Time continues. Does the right finish when the original refugees are all dead? Do we stop recognizing the great epic suffering of peoples because there's no survivors left? Do we start allowing people to deny the Jewish Holocaust because soon there will be no survivors of the Jewish Holocaust left? There is an integrity to memory, and there was a place called Palestine. And that is the problem for the Israelis and for the world. There was a place called Palestine.
Unquestionably, the Palestinian people have the right to return to their homeland. Equally unquestionably, the Palestinian people have suffered terribly since their expulsion from their homeland 70 years ago. The question is, how can that right be realised? And how can the rights of the 7 million Jewish people who currently live in Palestine be protected? Perhaps the answer lies in one united democratic secular state where Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs can coexist in a renewed, peaceful, prosperous and just nation-state. In order for that to happen, the Israeli state must first realise the Palestinian right to return. And the international community must support and fund what would be one of the biggest reverse migrations in recent history.